Picture this. You're standing in the pouring rain. 30 soldiers staring straight at you, waiting to see if you'll crack under pressure. Then someone loud enough for everyone to hear says you're only wearing that uniform because of your father. You didn't earn it. You're just riding his coattails. What would you do? Would you snap back? Would you walk away? Or would you stand there, completely silent, and let your actions speak louder than any words ever could? That's exactly what happened to one young officer. And what came next changed everything. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for this one. Rain hammered down at the base that morning, turning the parade ground into a muddy mess. The kind of weather that soaks through your kit and makes everything 10 times harder. 30 infantry soldiers stood in formation, all eyes fixed on their new platoon leader. She was 28, stood about 5'7", with the sort of quiet confidence that didn't need announcing. Her uniform was immaculate despite the downpour. Ranger tab visible on her shoulder, paratrooper patch from a previous deployment on the other. But none of that mattered to the staff sergeant, who just decided to test her in front of everyone. His voice cut through the rain like a knife lewd and deliberate, designed to wound. He told her she was wearing a uniform her father had earned, not her, that she was just playing dress-up in someone else's legacy. The entire platoon heard it. Some looked uncomfortable. Others watched carefully to see how she'd react. Would their new lieutenant lose her temper? Would she show weakness? Would she prove the doubters right? She did none of those things. She stood perfectly still, water streaming off her cap, and continued with her radio checks as if nothing had happened. Not a flinch. Not a word. Just pure, controlled composure. What that staff sergeant didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, was the weight this woman had been carrying for nearly 2 decades. Her father had been a decorated battalion commander, a genuine hero who died leading soldiers under fire when she was just 9 years old. An improvised explosive device had taken his life whilst he was trying to save wounded troops during an ambush. 14 soldiers survived that day because of him. He didn't. They gave him the Nation's highest military honor posthumously and gave his daughter a folded flag and a lifetime of expectations she never asked for. Growing up with that kind of shadow is brutal. Everyone who learns your name immediately makes the connection. They assume you got where you are because of who your father was, not because of what you've accomplished. So she spent her entire life trying to prove otherwise. Top grades at the military academy. Commissioned as an infantry officer when women had only just been allowed in the role. Deployed overseas at 22. But none of it was ever enough to silence the whispers. So at 23, she volunteered for one of the most grueling courses the military offers. 62 days of absolute hell designed to break even the strongest candidates. Sleep deprivation, starvation rations. Psychological warfare that makes grown men quit. Out of 19 women who started her class, only 3 graduated. She was one of them. She patrolled through swamps with hypothermia. She led missions on 3-hour sleep stretched across 5 days. She even failed once during the mountain phase due to a navigation error. Got recycled, then came back and absolutely smashed it the second time. But even earning that Ranger tab didn't stop the rumors. People still whispered she'd received special treatment, that the instructors had gone easy because of her name. It was maddening, but she kept pushing forward because that's what leaders do. Then came the deployment that changed everything. Her platoon was attached to a special forces team for village clearing operations in a hostile province. The mission went catastrophically wrong within the first 30 seconds. Complex ambush from 3 directions. Radio operator killed instantly. Forward element pinned down with casualties mounting. Everything was chaos, and in that moment of absolute terror, she took command. She organized offensive fire, called in close air support danger close to her own position, and personally led a counter-ESO that broke the ambush. 11 American soldiers walked away from that firefight because she kept her head when everyone else was losing theirs. They put her in for a high-level gallantry award. It got downgraded during the review process. She accepted it, locked it in a drawer, and never mentioned it again because medals don't erase doubt. Respect does. And respect has to be earned one skeptical soldier at a time. Now, she was at a new base with a new platoon that didn't trust her yet, and a staff sergeant who was openly challenging her authority. She had 2 weeks before a major evaluation exercise where the entire brigade would watch her succeed or fail. Every day that sergeant found new ways to undermine her. After physical training runs where she kept pace with the fastest soldiers, He'd comment loudly that she probably had someone carry her gear at the academy. When she qualified expert on multiple weapon systems, he suggested the range supervisor Mustav. Been going easy. During vehicle maintenance, where she diagnosed mechanical problems faster than most mechanics, he told his soldiers she'd just memorized the manual overnight to impress people. The platoon split down the middle. Half respected her obvious competence. The other half waited to see if disrespecting her would have consequences. The company commander pulled her aside and made it clear that if she could unsort this situation before the evaluation exercise, her career would suffer real damage, not just her reputation. Her actual future in the military. That night, alone in her quarters, she made a decision. She'd tried patience. She'd tried leading by example. Now, she'd do what her father would have done. Prove herself through performance so exceptional that it left absolutely zero room for doubt. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The battalion announced a shakedown exercise with only 48 hours' notice. 12-mile navigation course with tactical problems at checkpoints, culminating in a live-fire assault on a shoot house. Her platoon would go first, which meant every mistake would be magnified and every success noted. It was perfect. She gave her squad leaders, including the troublesome sergeant, for hours to prepare. Then she personally inspected every radio, every weapon, every piece of equipment. When they stepped off Monday morning at 600 hours, she put that sergeant in charge of navigation. Not to set him up for failure, but to give him responsibility, to show trust even when he hadn't earned it yet. He set a challenging pace. Not brutal, but demanding. She moved with the main body, rotating between squads, checking on soldiers, making corrections. When two younger troops struggled with a load, she had stronger soldiers redistribute their ammunition. Basic leadership, but effective. At the first checkpoint, a casualty evacuation under simulated fire, the sergeant ran the drill and made mistakes. Security positions were wrong. Casualty movement was inefficient. She let him finish, then gathered everyone and calmly explained what went wrong and how to fix it. No ego, no embarrassment, just teaching. By the 7th mile, during an equipment recovery exercise, when the sergeant struggled to organize his soldiers, she stepped in smoothly. 2-person teams rotating every 50 meters with squad leaders controlling the pace. The task that had been floundering suddenly completed in 7 minutes flat. By mile 10, during a hasty ambush drill, she ran it herself, positioned every soldier perfectly, executed the drill flawlessly. The sergeant watched closely. Really watched. Not looking for mistakes anymore. Looking to learn. The final event was the platoon live-fire exercise in the shoot house. 20 targets, mixing threats, and non. The first 3 squads performed well, but when her squad went last, she led from the front. They completed the course in under 2 minutes, with perfect target discrimination. 0 misses. Every soldier in the platoon saw it. The sergeant stood there processing what he'd just witnessed. She called the platoon into formation right there and addressed them directly. She told them some people thought she was there because of her father's name, and they were partially right. That name had opened doors, but she'd walk through those doors the same way they did, by meeting the standard. She talked about the 62 days of hell earning her Ranger tab, about getting recycled and coming back stronger, about leading soldiers under fire and earning her decorations the hard way, by not quitting when things got impossibly difficult. Then she looked straight at the sergeant and gave him a choice. Get on board or request a transfer to another platoon. Decide now. 10 seconds of absolute silence followed. Then the sergeant stepped forward and saluted. He was on board, and he apologized for being unprofessional. It wouldn't happen again. The evaluation exercise that followed was brutal. 2 weeks of constant scenarios designed to expose every weakness. But the platoon excelled at everything. Complex urban assaults, casualty evacuations under fire, defensive operations holding key terrain against overwhelming enemy forces, night raids on defended compounds. Every mission earned top marks from the evaluators. By the time the final scores posted, her platoon ranked first in the company and third in the entire battalion. The company commander found her during the final review and told her it was exceptional work. He was recommending her for early promotion and a new position as his executive officer. Then he lowered his voice and said something that hit harder than any compliment about performance. He'd deployed with her father years ago, and her father would have been proud. 3 weeks later, At the awards formation, she received a commendation in front of the entire unit. As she walked off the parade field, the sergeant was waiting. He needed to say something. He'd been wrong about her, he admitted. He thought she was writing her father's name, but he had unseen that she was honoring his legacy by being the kind of leader he was. She'd earned every bit of respect that Platoon had for her, and he was sorry he'd made her prove it the hard way. She told him she didn't need his apology, but she accepted it. And then she surprised him. She'd recommended him for promotion and for the platoon sergeant position when she moved up to executive officer. His eyes widened. He promised not to let her down. She smiled slightly and said that's exactly why she'd recommended him. Closing. That Eponine sitting alone in her quarters, she held her father's photos and realized something profound. She'd spent 20 years running from his shadow, trying to build her own identity, separate from his legacy. But the shadow wasn't a burden. It was a foundation. He'd built something worth building on, and by proving herself through competence, courage, and leadership. She'd honored that foundation whilst creating her own path forward. She'd earned something more valuable than medals that night. She'd earned the respect of soldiers who'd started as skeptics and ended as believers, not because of her father's name, but because of her own actions. Because she'd stood in the rain and refused to break. Because she'd led from the front when it mattered most. Because she'd turned doubt into certainty through sheer excellence. So here's what I want you to take from this story. Legacy can open doors, but only you can walk through them. Respect isn't given. It's earned through consistent performance, especially when people are watching for you to fail. And sometimes the best way to honor those who came before you is you to run from their shadow, but to prove you belong in it by being exceptional in your own right. If this story resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe because we share stories about real leadership, courage under pressure, and what it actually takes to earn respect when the odds are stacked against you. Drop a comment below telling us where you're rewatching from and what part of this story hit hardest. Was it the moment she stood silent in the rain? The live fire exercise? The final confrontation? Let us know. We'll see you in the next one.